Welcome everybody, my name is Antoni Szostakowski and today I will be your host during the first FIDE World University Team Online Blitz Cup. The competition consists of 4 teams playing in the knockout system. Each match between 2 teams consists of 4 matches on 4 boards, 3 males and 1 female. The rate of play is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds, and if in case of a tie, there will be another match played, and in case of another tie, there will be one Armageddon game. And there's no match for the third place, just the final. So there's only one winner and one worst place during this event. The teams participating are University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, St. Louis University, University of Missouri, and Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sports. So 3 universities from the US and 1 from Armenia. Let's jump straight to the games because they have already started. Let me know if there are any technical issues. Then I'm gonna fix them as soon as possible. The game I was interested in is the game between Benjamin Bach and Camel Dragon. As you can see on the screen, it's a game on the second board between University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and St. Louis University. So let's get it started. c4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, g3. So I guess it's gonna be some sort of transposition to the King's Indian defense schemes. But Benjamin Bach avoids the usual play of d4, but goes for b3 and bishop to b2. a5, trying to get some a4 in, knight c3, knight d4, taking the advantage of the pin on the bishop. Knight a4, takes, knight to f6, rook c1, d4, c5, knight a6, rook c4, and knight d7. The pawn on d4 is somehow vulnerable, and it can be taken at once. But then black does take the pawn on c5. So the move played in the game is knight to d3, protecting the pawn on c5, and at the same time discouraging black from playing e5. Because in case of e5, I guess knight takes e5 would come, and takes. White would be just a pawn up. The action will be pretty quick as it is a Blitz tournament, so we're hoping to see a lot of interesting moments. Knight to b4 was played in the game, but I'm wondering whether White can just take on the pawn on d4 after some sort of a3, kicking the knight away. Or maybe it's not that easy because black created a threat of taking on d3 with his own knight. So Benjamin decided to take the pawn on d4 with the rook. And what's Camille's plan in this position? I'm not entirely sure, since he's just a pawn down, and I don't see that much of a counterplay. Knight takes a2. This move does exist. But can White play queen to a1, creating the pin on the a file and enabling black to take a retreat to b4? I guess that might be a case. Let's take a look. If knight to b4, then we just take on b4, and a takes b4 is not possible because we might lose the rook in at the same time. So what's the point here? I'm not entirely sure. Benjamin is also up on the clock, so it's just game over. The game just ended because the knight on a2 is dropped. So a very important win on the board number 2. Alright, let's jump to the another game between Grigory Oparin and Haik Martirosyan. And maybe we won't watch it from the very beginning, but let's take a look at the current position, because the structure is pretty symmetrical. Only the d file is a file that is opened, and black just went for the break on the queen side with the move b5. Rook to d1, taking some pressure along the d file. keeping the tension on knight on d7. That's the most important thing, I would assume. And maybe bishop to e3 can be possible later on, because black would be forced to put his queen on c4. But after g6, knight to h6, the bishop has traded for the knight. And some weekend dark squares, that might be the case. That might be quite important in the future. Rook a to b8 played by Martirosyan. He wants to take some initiative on the queen side, some counterplay. That's very important in this type of positions for black. Bishop to e3, now queen f8 or queen to c4 is possible. Queen to c4 was played. b3, where does the queen go? It has to take the pawn on c3. Or maybe not. Queen to e6 is possible as well. But after queen to e6, I guess I could make an argument for taking on b5. Because taking with the pawn would drop the pawn on a5. And taking with the rook would allow some move like c4. But he took the pawn on c3. Rook to c1 was played, queen b4, rook takes c6, and knight takes d4. So a pawn sack for Grigory Oparin. And I'm concerned, how will he proceed in this position? Pawn down, but some initiative. Those bishops can provide some massive counterplay, some massive compensation, both on the queen side as well as on the king side. So rook to b5, rook to c4. It forks two pieces, right? Like knight is hanging and the queen was under attack as well. So white wins a piece. But black has two pawns in return. However, I assume those two bishops will be definitely enough to convert this play, to convert this position. Rook c4, knight f6, rook to c7, and now the key would be to bring another rook to the 7th rank and get the destruction of black's king side. Rook to c1 was played, not rook to b1. Maybe the point is to bring another rook to c6, but after rook e6, rook a7, rook a2 has been played, and now rook c8 or rook c7, both moves are possible, I assume, since we want to just create a lot of pressure on the f7 pawn. And now bishop c4, attacking a2, attacking f7 is on the board, so we get a winning position for Grigory Oparin. So that might be another important win for his match. I guess I have okay. The results are as they are on the screen. They have jumped automatically. I don't know how it happened. So we have a result. Grigory Oparin defeated Haik Martirosyan. All right, we have some more games being played. Let's get the game between the champion of the world in individual blitz for women, Anna Sarksyan, versus Grandmaster Mikhail Antipov. So what's the position all about? Anna has a pawn up. She's a pawn up. She has an extra a3 pawn, and the clock has run down for Mikhail Antipov. I'm not sure how did it happen. Maybe some connection issue, or yeah, he just flagged, I assume, because the game is over. So we can see University of Missouri is right now on the lead against Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sport. It's a result 2-1, and the last game is between where is this game? Between Olga Badelka with black pieces and Tigran Azaryan with the black on the black side. So Olga is currently a pawn up, and the king side for the white side is quite shattered, deploying the bishop along the diagonal by moving the pawn to d4, attacking g2, attacking h3 because the pawn is pinned. That might be crucial. So I would propose that some move like rook to d4 may be possible, but maybe it is not. Right now d4 is not possible because it would drop the queen on g5. So definitely not that easy to convert that advantage of opponent of a better position for black, especially in a blitz game, but activity is a key to that situation. Rook to f8, doubling up on the f file, getting some rook to f1 maybe in the future, but white took his pawn back. Rook to f2, king to h2, oh no, checkmate in one move. Queen to g2 will be played shortly. I assume that in this position white had the pre-move of king h2 in view of rook to f1, but rook to f2 was played, and after king h2 the game has some sort of a lag, although I would assume that Olga just took this pawn on g2 and won a game just to make another, just to give another point to the University of Missouri. And as we can see on the screen, the results are in 3-1 for the University of Missouri. However, the games between the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and St. Louis University have some sort of a lag, maybe a connection issue is on, because both on the side and in the app I can't see them. I can't see them at all. Maybe they are in the... No, they are not in the other section. So we are confirmed with just one result. I guess we're gonna wait for confirmation on the site how did this match end, and for the time being we know that University of Missouri has taken one victory over the Armenian side, so they need just 1.5 points out of 3, the match points of course, to clinch the place in the finals of the event. Alright, so I guess we are gonna wait for the update on this side, because I can't tell what's really going on. But if we alright, I have one move being I see one move being played on the screen, but does it concern that game or the others? I'm not entirely sure. Okay, I see some games being played, but all right, maybe it's those 3 games were locked, so I guess we can jump straight into them. All right, so let's jump to the game between Robbie Kevlishvili and Alicja Sliwicka. Robbie is from the St. Louis University and Alicja from the University of Texas Rio Grande. We've got some weird Sicilian on the board. Knight c3, bishop d7. That's not a most common move. G3, just a modest setup. Knight c6, bishop g2, g6, castles, bishop g7. So we will end up in some sort of a dragon Sicilian, with white developing the bishop on via the fianchetto. Knight d5 has been played. White wants to cement this knight with another knight to c3, and claim that his slight advantage, slight spatial advantage, is more important than black's c file. So let's see what Alicja is going to choose in this position. I guess it's quite an important one, because she could take on d5, but after he takes d5, the knight gets some sort of misplaced. But I guess this has been played, and after knight to e5, Robbie has played pawn to c3, just blocking this bishop straight on the diagonal. The pawn on c3 is quite strongly defended, so the bishop will not be that that strong as it would be against the b2 pawn. So a5, getting some counterplay on the queen side. a4, a3 would be a dream for black, because if she could make this happen, then after a3, the pawn on c3 would lose his protector. So that would be a great news for her. Although I'm not sure if White, of course, needs to allow it. I'm sure that he doesn't, but that's a matter of question whether and how can he stop this plan. a4 could be played, but he decided to go knight to d4, and after a4, what is his conception on this position? And does he want to go a3? But after a3, a lot of light squares would be weakened, so the bishop could maybe snatch here in the future. What's the other way of playing? Queen to e2 by Robbie, creating a threat of f4, or not really. After a3, f4 is not that great, because the knight still has a place on g4. It can hide on f6 and be more or less fine. And so what's the point of Robbie in this position? Now Alicja will take her time and think how to proceed, because this position is I would say quite an important one, since she can claim that she has a counterplay and she can go immediately for it, but she also can play it slowly. Alright, rook to c8 has been played. That's also the other move I was thinking about, because after f4 the knight has a square on c4 due to the protection of the rook on c8. So that might be the idea. Now Robbie has played a3. That's the move I was mentioning earlier. But now the knight can jump via a5 to b3 and get some play on the queen side, exploding those weakened light squares. But rook to e1, getting some pressure along the e-file, for the time being attacking the pawn on e7. So Alicja needs to protect it. However, I'm not sure if the standard move rook to e8 is that good, because bishop to g5 can be played, getting another piece to the attack on this pawn. So black of course could protect, but I'm not entirely sure whether that passive play does satisfy black. And we've got rook to e8 on the board, as mentioned. So what is going to happen? I'm not sure yet. The other plan might be just to get the pawn all the way to the h5, and I guess that's what Robbie chose. h4 and h5, stopping the pawn advance and preparing the g4 square maybe for the bishop in the future. And that would be, of course, a better square for the bishop than it stands on now. Bishop g5, bishop to f6. Alright, that's an interesting decision, because Alicja does allow to double her pawns along the f-file, but it will open the e-file for her. So definitely another advantage being taken. After queen to c2, queen b6 can be played, attacking the b2 pawn and getting some massive pressure along the b-file. So bishop to f4 was played in the game. So Robbie decided that he doesn't want to take part in that sort of play. b5, overprotecting the knight, protecting the pawn on a4, and rook to b1, overprotecting the pawn on b2. So now the queen can move freely, since the pawn is being protected. Maybe not to f3, because that would allow the fork on d2. But some other moves are also considerable. Queen to a5, I'm not entirely sure where does this queen want to go. Maybe some sort of a sacrifice can be played. Let's suppose that some dumb move would be played, but of course it doesn't. Knight to c2. So now queen b6. Queen has been given another route to the play, but the very nice maneuver by Robbie. Knight c2, knight before, knight to c6. That will be a dream square for this knight, and that's why the knight had to remove himself to the a5 square, but also it does create the square on c4 for the rook. Now it has some impact on the fourth rank, so it's not that straightforward as I was thinking at the very beginning. Bishop to f3, maybe preparing some sacrifice on the king side, since look at all black's pieces, they are mostly placed on the queen side, so getting some king side attack might be the idea for Robbie. But the game will speed up really fast. 25 seconds for Robbie and only 10 seconds for Alicia. So the result, all three results are certainly possible, although the time favors Robbie a little bit. King to f8, very topical move, protecting the rook, protecting the e7 pawn. So in case that rook comes to e1, the rook is overprotected, and that's what happens on the board. Rook to e1, and now if bishop takes on f6, then the rook is not hanging, obviously. Bishop comes back to d7, knight to c6 could be considered by Robbie, but he goes for the move queen d1. I don't know what it does. King g7, knight c2, bishop takes g5. I don't like this decision at all. But however, Alicia does make it work. Bishop to g4 is now strongly cemented by pawn, by the rook, and of course by the queen. So no kingside attack being taken by Robbie, and approximately 5 seconds for both players right now. Alicia does take the pawn, so it might be a crucial victory for her. Let's take a look at the results of the match. It's only one game being finished. Queen takes b5, rook to c8, so the pawn has been taken back. Queen to d1. However, I like black's position more because of the impact on the queen side, and also very centralized pieces. Rook to b3, knight f1, rook e2, attacking the queen, getting some pressure on the second rank, and now another pawn being taken. Knight to e3, does drop the piece, rook takes e3, game over, takes, queen takes, and the pin. It should be done, but it has been missed. What's wrong with rook takes f3? Come on, and even I'm not sure why. Knight to d4 right now. Knight takes f3 does probably win the exchange, or does it? I guess it does, but the time is so low that it doesn't matter at all. But the exchange was won, and f5 checkmate. One more. Checkmate and one move was possible, or maybe it wasn't. That wasn't a checkmate. I'm also a bit losing my temper, losing my mind because of the speed the game has taken. Rook takes h5, and now rook g2, rook to a2. All those pawns g3, a3 are so weak that they can be certainly taken at once. And here we are, rook takes a3, another pawn for Alicia, and the a pawn is running down the board, so it probably will be game over, but she has to worry about the checkmate from her opponent g5. That's a huge threat. She obviously will not allow this, but knight f3, attacking the rook, preparing the move to g5, so it's not that easy as it was. Rook to e7, attacking the pawn, and now a3, a2. Does it win, or does it not? I'm not sure. It probably doesn't, so it's totally unclear. f6 right now will be a good move. Preparing the move to pawn to a2 and getting the rook out of the way with check. But it wasn't played, so only 3 seconds for black. That's the thing that concerns me the most. But the d pawn is running down the board. Who will get his queen first? f7, rook a2, what's going on? Taking on f7, rook d2, and I guess it will end up in a draw. This game has been really crazy, a lot of strange things happening, although Alicia had the advantage most of the time, and now the endgame is definitely a draw. After Robbie sacrifices the rook for the pawn on d3, the g-pawn will round to g7, and it has to be taken by the rook. So we will end up in the king versus king, the most brave, the most fighting outcome of the game. Just bare kings on the board, and we've got a draw. And as we can see from the results, St. Louis University defeated University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, 2.5 to 1.5. So had Alicia won her game, we would have a draw, but it wasn't certainly easy. The time was really low. That's why a lot of mistakes have tended to happen. Alright, do we have another game ongoing? I guess we do have. So let's jump to the round number 2. Let's take a quick break. So University of Missouri have won the first match 3-1, as we all remember. Let's jump to the game between maybe Mikhail Antipov and Anna Sarksyan. Alright, what's the material count on the position? White is a pawn up, and black has a lot of weaknesses along the king side, and that's why I would assume white's position is really better, and it might get dangerous for black pretty soon. Knight to d6, rook takes d1, rook takes d1. Now maybe bishop g7, targeting the pawn on e5 should be on the cards. Although no, bishop g7 does blunder a pawn in one move, so that's not the move to be played. But I can't suggest anything different at all. And just 3 seconds for Anna Sarksyan. She went for the move bishop to g6, but after bishop d3 b6, she's just a pawn down, and one of the bishops will be exchanged anytime white wants. So the advantage of 2 bishops will expire pretty soon. That's why I would say black's position is becoming more and more hopeless. Although, of course, in a blitz game, anything can happen. Now knight takes f7. Yeah, I just spotted his tactics. If king takes f7, we take the rook. And if rook takes d3 as played, we've got knight takes h6, king h7, and queen takes d3, king takes h6, and white did win another pawn. So we've got some, I would say, winning endgame for white. 2 pawns up, although with the queens it's getting sometimes a little bit tricky, since of the potential of some perpetual checks. If we imagine a world where black just counts with her queen to those squares e1 and g3, then it would be a perpetual check. Although right now it's not obviously possible. b5 h4. What's the point? Yeah, the point is the checkmate. So a very nice victory for Mikhail Antipov. Let's see it one more time. King takes h4, queen to h6. The only square is the square on g2, and their queen to h2. We've got a beautiful checkmate. All the squares being taken from the king, and he's also in the checkmating net. So a very nice win for Mikhail Antipov. Also, the game between Manukyan and Raya Harshit has ended. So let's jump to the game between Haik Martirosyan and Grigory Oparin. Grigory defeated Haik in the first game, and right now we've got some tricky knight endgame, a pawn up for black. So we would assume he's the only one to be in charge of this position. He's the only one to maybe create some chances to win. Although it's not that easy, since the position is getting really close. Not much maybe can be done. Although let's see how Grigory tries to convert the advantage. f4, knight c1, king f7, h5, but the pawn on f4 can be taken just into moves. Knight d2, knight f4, exactly. And the move h5 was just to take the space from the king. King to e7, and now knight takes f4 can obviously happen. So it's getting more and more drawish, I would assume. Although maybe white can, even if he had time to take this pawn, he would be really happy. But I'm not sure if he has any sort of possibility like this. Although king to f7 is not the move I like that much. Although there's nothing more that could be done. King c1 preparing king b2, knight c4 taking the square, but king c2, knight d3, king b3, and knight f5. That's the point Grigory has made. Taking maybe on d4, although that's a very smart decision by Haik Martirosyan not to take the pawn on f4. Because if he had taken on f4, then the pawn on d4 would get dropped pretty soon. Now king a5, he's just running for the c6 pawn. But after king b6, there's king d7 protecting everything. So is it that easy? And he is about to get his f-pawn dropped. Knight f4, knight f3, pawns are have been exchanged, and some zugzwang after knight d4, knight b4. The pawn is being attacked twice and is defended twice, but no move can be played. That's like, I guess, the current position, and indeed it is. If black moves his king, then the pawn can be taken by the knight, and the same story happens if we remove the knight away. But the clock has come to the wire, to the exact 0:00. So has the game ended on the clock? I'm not entirely sure. We don't have any confirmation yet, yeah, but now we have that the game is being continued, and the pawn has been won. And how does white stop the d pawn? Is it possible just to reroute the knight to c3? But it will take a lot of time, and definitely will not be easy. So I guess black's position became just winning, although it's not that easy. Now king b7, creating a threat of pushing the pawn to c7 and all the way to c8. It can be stopped only by the move knight d5, and I'm wondering whether the move knight takes d5 is possible, although it is not, or it is a check. Okay, it takes d5, c7, d1 queen, and c8 queen. That's the position that could happen, and the pawn up for black, so he would be definitely satisfied. And c7 has been played, knight takes c3, c8, d1, and another endgame with the pawn up, but now we have a pawn down, but he drops his queen. Oh, what's going on after queen d5, queen to a5, dropping the queen on the on the skewer, so that's game over, 2 pawns up. But the pawn grabbing hasn't paid off at all for Grigory Oparin, so that's why he went down. Although in this position, after queen g7, he could have played something like king to e8, and after check, king to d7, check back, and then king to c6, so he would be probably winning. But he went for the move king d6, and after queen c7, only move king d5, and queen a5 does win a queen. So a very nice victory for Martirosyan, very tense game. And Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sport does take a lead in the second match. It's result 2-1. The last game is between Olga Badelka and Tigran Azaryan, and it has ended in a draw. It is drawn, but what is this endgame all about? White is a pawn up. Can it be won by any means? I'm not sure. White would have to go for something like king to d4, and after rook g3, maybe rook c4, king c5, and covering the p-file with the rook. It was the only try, but making a draw does not satisfy the University of Missouri at all, since just Armenian side does take their pawn point back, and we've got 1-1 tied result for the time being in this matchup. So let's jump straight to the other match between University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and St. Louis University. Let's take a look at the game between Nicholas Feodor and Vladimir Feodosiev. What is this? What is this opening? Oh, come on. That's bullying. That's bullying, definitely. Throwing a couple moves away in such an important match. Well, why did he drop his piece? Like, it's so weird. This game is definitely weird. So the current position, we have a material imbalance because Black has a bishop and a knight, but White has a rook in return, and I guess one pawn on h3. And the pawn on b7 can be snapped away pretty soon. After a5, we've got the move a3, removing the knight away, and then taking the pawn on b7. That's why it's not that easy to hold on to this pawn. Maybe Black just lost his advantage, and the players hiding by those nicknames are pretty strong. Vladimir Feodosiev is around 2700. Or maybe even above 2700. But definitely he's been in the light chess for a while, and Nicholas Feodor is 2500. He's not a grandmaster yet, but I guess it will come pretty soon. So we've got pawns on b7 and f7 being taken, and the fork! Oh, come on, what's going on? That's so weird. Why do you blunder a rook in one move? I know it's a blitz game and it's not easy, but definitely many other moves could be played, and king d3 is definitely not one of them. Attacking the king, attacking the rook, king has to move, and then we drop the rook. So a very nice victory for Vladimir Feodosiev. Let's jump to the game between Gabuzyan Hovanes from Rio Grande Valley and Benjamin Bach from St. Louis. What's going on? We've got some Sicilian structure. Pawn up currently for Black. That's that pawn on d6, and not that I would say not that much compensation, but I guess there is a lot of compensation. Look at this knight. It has practically no safe square to come back, and maybe some move like a f5 can be played just to make sure to create a lot of play on the king side, where Black is certainly weakened. Look at those squares: f6, g7, h6. There's no dark squared bishop to cover it, so maybe f5 can be played, but that's the move. That's not. That was not White to play. That was a Black's move. Black's turn. Queen to c5. Let's take a look. Pinning the rook, the queen, and the king. That pin doesn't win anything yet, but it might force the trade of queens, which would be certainly favorable for the Black side, since he's a pawn up, and he would love to trade pieces. That's the key rule of chess. If you have material advantage, then trades of equal pieces do favor you a lot. And the weaker side would like either to create some counterplay or to trade as much pawns as possible. But now we've got the first point ongoing. That's the decision to create a lot of counterplay. First, the move before, deflecting the queen away, and now f6. Is there any checkmate incoming, or probably not? Because if we move the king, the queen can't come to h4 since it would drop the rook. So after has king g8 been played, or are there any sort of issues? Maybe a little bit of a lack. And if we look at the other results, the score of the match is tied at the time being. The grandmaster from Turkey, Ali Marandi, has won his game against Alicia Sliwicka, and only those players left standing. So if St. Louis University would convert the advantage and win another game, that would be a critical situation for University of Rio Grande Valley, because they would be 2 points behind their opponents, and it would not be easy for them. But let's not force the matters. Let's take a look at the end game, since Black is 2 pawns up, but they are the double pawns on the c-files. A lot of quick action going on. That's not something I would really expect. But the rook on the on the square on a7 is pretty active, so it does discourage the king from coming to h7, but it did come to h7. So I was wrong in my prediction. If king comes to g6, then rook to f8 has to be played just to cover the f6 pawn. And right now we've got 2 pawns, 3 pawns for both players. So the game should be tied, should be drawn, but I'm not entirely sure right now, since the pawn on a3 is distracting the white's king, and if we get the rook to e1 and take both of the kingside pawns, the endgame will be definitely winning. But I'm not sure if that is something that is about to happen at all. So let's see. It's not easy. The pawn on e4 has been dropped, but Black has to sacrifice the pawn on h5. Now the pawn can come e3, e2, e1 maybe. The 2 pawns for Benjamin Bach, but the h-pawn is pretty dangerous. So the endgame is not as straightforward as we would call it from the very beginning. It's not that easy for Black to activate his king, and White can maybe just hold on to his position. King a2, king c2, or king b1, king a2, king b1 probably are the moves. But right now the king has activated himself. He goes all the way to f4. He does support the e3 pawn, so probably we will see the trade of those pawns, a3 and h5, and then if Black is in time, he's definitely winning. Taking the rook to the e-file and covering the path of the pawn on e3. That will be the plan, and I guess that's something that is about to happen. Rook f8, rook f5, and now the trade of the rook is obviously not possible. The pawn on e2 is just too fast, and the position we have on the board right now is completely winning for Black. Rook to e5, followed by e3, e2, e1 is winning. So Benjamin Bach is about to win his game and snatch a match victory for the University from St. Louis. And this would make a whole of a difference, since it would be the Rio Grande University would be 2 points down behind their opponents, and it will be very difficult for them to come back. And has the game ended? Yes, indeed it did. So we've got 2.5 to 1.5 for St. Louis University. Alright, I guess we will go to another matchup between University of Missouri and Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sport. Since the games are not playing simultaneously, so since the second match started earlier than the first one. Alright, so let's take a look at the battle of the leaders for both teams. So Grigory Oparin and Haik Martirosyan. The match is tight. The result is tight. It's 1 victory for both universities. So we will definitely expect some crazy fights at the very end. Knight f3, c5, c4, knight to c6, d4, and pawn takes, knight takes, g6, e4. So we got the Maroczy bind, as it is called, and knight c2, d6, bishop e2, bishop e6, castle, rook c8, and knight to e3. Grigory is playing really fast. So I would assume he's still in his, maybe not preparation, but he's in some sort of position he is familiar with. Knight f6, knight to c3, short castle, and don't play b3, since that would drop the pawn due to the pin along the diagonal. Bishop d2 was played, a6, rook to c1, knight d4. Now the big disadvantage of this move, bishop d2, is that it allows the knight to come to d4 freely and really disturb white's position. That's why maybe it was a necessity, but I'm not entirely sure about this. Knight e2 d5, getting the another knight to the d5 square, and then maybe preparing the move bishop to e3, attacking the knight on d4 and forcing him to move. So I guess that's the plan. f5, breaking right away in the center. That's the way of play that is typical for the Marocci structure. E takes f5, bishop takes f5. It does leave the d6 and e7 pawns weakened, as Grigory tries to exploit right now, but it also does get a lot of counterplay along the f file. Now the pawn on e7 is hanging, so the question is how black is going to deal with it. Rook to f7, that's a little bit artificial for me, but it's very sensible, covering the e7 and getting also the play on the f file if possible. Bishop to d3, trading those light squared bishops. That's very typical for those type of structures where where black goes f5, then white certainly wants to trade those light squared bishops. And now e6, attacking the knight. Knight has to come back. If we take on d3, then we take back with the queen, and we are happy with our position. Pawn on d6 is being attacked. The diagonal has been weakened. So I guess Grigory is very happy with his own performance, and it may be another important game for the overall results, since we remember last time, in a very good position, pawn up in the queen endgame, Grigory dropped his queen, and that's why the University of Missouri lost the match. So I guess Grigory is in the spirit to come back pretty soon. Knight to f5, I don't like this move that much, but I'll start to like it now. Knight takes f5, he takes f5, and the point is, you can't really take this pawn, since I guess something like, first of all, f4, and if you take with the bishop, then maybe some sort of bishop c3 idea is possible, getting the knight to the square on e4. But f3 has been played, bishop f2, queen to f8. However, despite this pawns being advanced, the position is not that good at all for black. White has a lot of targets to attack. First of all, the pawn on d6 is being attacked, so that's why I would say white is much better right now. Queen to d3, rook to d1, and getting the knight to d6 and keeping the pressure on the pawn. It's not easy at all to deal with it. And let's see if Haik Martirosyan will manage to defend his position. I believe he's capable of it, although it's not easy at all. But maybe some crazy counterplay will happen for black. Rook to c6 for the time being, making sure the pawn on d6 is protected. So what's about to happen? a4, preparing the move b5, and after a takes b5, a takes b5, it would force the rook away. Knight f6, b5, takes, knight to e4. That's an interesting exchange sack. You sacrifice the rook, but you want to take the knight away, the bishop away. However, White decided that it's not worth for him. He just took back the knight, and he pushes the pawn on the queen side. c5, the pawn can't be taken due to the bishop hanging. So we've got bishop f6 on the board, but the pawn on d6 can be maybe not snatched, but I was about to mention c6 is certainly going to happen, getting your own pawn as far as possible, the pass pawn, and he is very, very advanced, so it might bring a lot of trouble to the black side. Queen e8, queen d5. So right now maybe rook c1 followed by some sort of c7 is possible. Although yeah, rook c7 and rook c1, queen f7, hoping to get queens traded at the very least. But queen b5 is the most sensible way of dealing with this position. Although maybe black wants to play d5 in the future. If the pawn gets to c7, then we play c5 and attack the pawn with the bishop. And now Haik insists on keeping on exchanging the queens, but Grigori is not willing to do it, as we are witnessing right now. I guess the time advantage is a key factor, despite the position is being better for Grigori Oparin, but we also take into the consideration the time. Since 40 seconds up for the white side will make black's life definitely more difficult. Now maybe the queen can be centralized on the square on d5. No, queen to d2 was played. Maybe it wasn't that easy because in chess we do follow principles. But we also have to remember that chess is a very concrete game, and concrete variations decide over the principles. h3, preparing the move king to h2 and the free square for the king. Queen e3. I don't like that trade that much, since the pawn on e3 can be attacked, and I guess it can be taken, or maybe I'm mistaken. I wasn't supposed to rhyme, but it just came this way. But the pawn on d4 has been protected, and rook to d7. All right, so Haik Martirosyan proved that this position is probably balanced right now, since I don't see that sort of way for white to prevail. The pawn could be taken, but we would witness endgame 3 versus 2 on the king side. So it is a theoretical draw, and Grandmaster Martirosyan would definitely hold it. So Grigori Oparin decides that it's not his business. He goes for some complex variation, maybe transferring the rook to g6, sacrificing the pawn on c7, but getting maybe the pawn on h5 out of the way would be a key to get anything done. Although I'm not sure at all if that would help, and if there was any sort of concrete play that would justify this line. King f7, I see a trap. F6, and if you take on c7, I go rook g7, and after king back, I win the rook. So that's the move I would, I guess the players would not fall for. Rook g1, king h8 was played, and trading the rooks, king g7. What's going on? If we take the pawn on d4, the point is that we go e2, and then trade the pawn on c7 for the e-pawn, and then we probably hold, but it is the line in the game. Although now the king maybe can snap the h5 pawn away, or king d6, even better, just winning the game straight away. In this particular position, e1 had to be played, but king f8, king d6, threatening king d7, and then winning the rook is probably just over, although e1 is being threatened at this time, so we need to just stabilize our position. Rook to e1 is the best way to do this. Rook takes e2 is a threat, deflecting the rook and then promoting our pawn to c8 will be definitely enough Another win for Grigory Oparin against Haik Martirosyan. So it would be 2-1 in their individual match. All right, I guess it's just all over. Yeah, and it indeed is. Let's take a look at another results. It got updated pretty soon. All right, so in the third round, University of Missouri, as we can see, defeated the Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sport 3-1 with the victories for Oparin, Antipov, and Raya. All right, and the last game remaining is the game between Benjamin Bach and Gabuzyan Chovanes, and it's an important one since, as we can see on the board, on the screen, it's 2-1 for University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. So a draw for Chovanes would mean a match victory, but he didn't want a draw. He wanted more. His position was completely winning. Let's take a look at it one more time. The point is, you get checkmated along the second rank, and there's really no way to stop that. The king has its own safe square on h5, and now queen g2 or queen h2 would deliver a checkmate. So University of Texas Rio Grande Valley does hold on in the do or die situation. They won their first match out of the two. So definitely something that does hit up this matchup more, and 2-1 in the other match between University of Missouri and Armenian Institute of Physical Culture and Sport. All right, do we have the last, supposedly the last round of the semifinals for this event? Not yet. We will have to wait a little bit. So in case you have any sort of question, I do watch a chat on the Chess24 YouTube and on FIDE Chess YouTube. If you have any sort of questions, I would definitely answer them. So feel free to ask. And if not, we will gonna just wait for the another match. Two universities are facing the elimination from the event, so this will make definitely things more interesting and more spicy for both sides, for both matchups. Although I do think that the University of Missouri is simply stronger than Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sport, although I will not rule out the Armenian side for the time being, since they have proven to won one match. We have a question on chat. Which schools are top dogs? It's not that easy to evaluate, since all four universities playing in this event have proven to be the strongest one in the entire championship, since they have been chosen by the individual results of their students in the Blitz event and in the Rapid one. So they have proven to have strong individuals, but as we can see from the results, the University of Missouri is probably the favorite, to win, alongside the St. Louis University, since in the team competition both universities have proven their strength. So I would say they are bound to win, but it's not easy at all. We still do believe that the University of Texas and the Armenian State Institute are about to clinch the tie breaks, which will be the one single match between the teams, and in case of another time, there will be just one Armageddon game between players chosen by the team captains. The individual university event, there have been I would say 4 results, because there was a final for the Blitz tournament for men and women, and there was at the same, not at the same time, but 1 week afterwards, there was a tournament consisting of rapid chess, both for open section and the women one. So the rapid winner of the open section was Kirill Shevchenko from Lviv State University of Physical Culture. For the women's section, Yulia Antolak won the event from University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. But in the Blitz event, the Armenians have proven their power. Haik Martirosyan won the event for the open section, and Anna Sarksyan won the competition for the women side. So I guess that makes all the this does satisfy the question. Who's my favorite player from this tournament? I don't know. My Polish friends are playing in this tournament in the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and I silently do root for them. All right. I can see that the games are slowly starting, so let's take a look at the game between Feodor and Feodosiev. Let me first find it. It's this game. All right, so Feodosiev trolled in the second round with some sort of a6, h6, rook a7, but now he has chosen the Caro-Kann defense, the solid one, knight f3, d5, d3, and nowadays that's the popular line, inviting the queen trade after d takes d4, d takes d4, queen takes d1, but Feodosiev went for queen to c7, knight c3, d takes d4, and we have a symmetrical, not exactly symmetrical structure, but only one pair of pawns being exchanged down the d-file. The pawns on e4 and e5 are just standing in front of each other, and the only difference is that white does not have the pawn on c3, which is certainly important, since the square on d4 can be exploited for the black side. The light squared bishops have been exchanged. And what's the point right now? Knight to d7. Feodor has brought his knight to f5, just targeting this king. Maybe, and that's the point he wants to make. He wants to just attack the weakened king, but it's not that easy. The bishop has come to f8, and after queen g3, pinning the king. And the pawn with the king would certainly get removed from this pin. So bishop to e3 is just a natural developing move, and the main battle will happen along the d-file. Who does take the charge of it will claim the advantage, claim the maybe even the point in the future. But let's not force the matters. The knight was kicked from the f5 square, and the bishop was brought to g7. Protecting the knight, protecting the pawn, so it mainly has a protective role. It's being it can't move that actively, since the pawn on e5 is standing there. But black, and by black I mean Vladimir Feodosiev, is bound to place his rook on the d-file and get the fight along it, although he has to watch out for this nasty little pawn on a7. So that's why, for example, after rook to d8, if we take, rook takes, queen takes, and then maybe bishop a7 is possible, just taking the pawn. And now after b6, trapping the bishop, we can play like something like queen e3, targeting the pawn on the b6. But something different has been played. b6, just covering that diagonal from the bishop. King to h2, rook to d8. So the fight for the d-file is really ongoing right now. So I would say the position is pretty much balanced, although a lot of different things can happen, and the time does favor black. So maybe in the future, in the time trouble, he will prove his chances. Now queen Queen e7, knight c1, knight does come to d3, attacking the pawn on e5, and after rook d1, maybe knight d3, knight d4 is a possibility, just taking control of the d4 square. As I was mentioning earlier, the point is that the pawn on c3 cannot be placed, and this does make the white's life a little bit trickier. The move hasn't been played. Vladimir hasn't committed yet to his decision. So probably he's considering something like rook to d8, but he's played the move rook to e8, and after queen d1, it's not that easy to bring anything to the d4 square, because if we want to just strengthen it with the pawn, we get our d5 square weakened, and it's not something we would dream of. So knight to c5 played by Feodor. Now Feodor is in some sort of trouble, at least his pawn is. He has to protect it, so it's not easy to think of a defense. Maybe something like a f3 has to be played, just cementing the pawn structure. Although 3 pawns on the third rank is not something usual, but the move queen f3 has been played, knight e6, queen d1. White wanted a repetition, maybe a draw, but h5 was played by Feodor. He's not interested in drawing this game, he wants to win. That's understandable, obviously. Now after knight to d3, maybe knight can come to d4, but now knight b4, maybe. Yeah, a5 has been played, kicking the knight away, and after knight to d3, maybe knight e4. If we take, then you lose the pawn on e4. Knight is being attacked, the only protector of the bishop, of the pawn, but something different has been played. c5, cementing that square, knight to d5, takes, and knight to d4. The time advantage is still favoring the black player, so that's something we have to watch out for in the future. Although maybe some concrete play by black can also be dangerous. The knight on d4 can be kicked probably with c3, and it indeed did. And knight to f5 and g4, once again kicking this knight away, but I'm not entirely sure if that's beneficial for black, because for white, because he does weaken his position a lot. Knight can find a safe square on d6, and Vladimir can also take the pawn on the bishop on e3. So it's not that simple, not that straightforward. A lot of different things can happen. So we have to watch out what is going on and what is going to happen. If we take on g4, no, knight h4, just targeting the king, that's understandable. Maybe queen d7 followed by something like f5, trying to break away the king side is something on cards. H takes g4, h takes g4, and now e4 and queen to d7. As I was mentioning, the queen will attack the g4 pawn and will also look at the pawn on a4. 20 seconds for white, 50 seconds for black, so the game will speed up. And look at the square on f3. If knight comes there, it might be massive. And now queen takes g4 is the point, of course. So let's take a look at it once again, and in slow motion, so-called. Knight f3, knight takes f3, queen takes g4. Check, attacking the knight, and now the threat could be something like queen h3, queen g2. So white decided to go queen f1, and after bishop e5, the bishop on g3 is being dropped. It's about to be lost. So, or is it king h2 and preparing queen h3? After queen h4, we have a cover of queen to h3. So it's not that easy. Maybe king g7 should be played. What was the move? Yeah, king g7. Fantastic move, preparing the move rook to h8. Although, is it possible? No, it's not. It was not. Look at this. Rook h8 does fall to bishop to e5, f6, bishop takes, king takes, and we drop the rook. So it's not easy. And the game has ended. Let's take a look how it went. Queen e5 and white resigned. If he goes back to g1, then we get queen e1, forking the king and the rook. And if we go queen g3, then we get rook to h8. And if king back, then we've got the checkmate. So a very important victory for University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. But we can witness that St. Louis University have already won their semi-final match 2-1 in this match. Does mean that they will get at least a draw, and a draw indeed is happening, 2-2. So 2 victories, 1 draw, and we welcome St. Louis University at the finals. All right, let's take a look at another games. Maybe once again we can reach to the game between Haik Martirosyan and Grigory Oparin. What is this? What is this position all about? Let me take a look at at the piece count first. We've got some. We've had some piece sacrifice, right? The bishop and the pawn for 3 pawns on the king side, and with a little time, I guess it can happen. Anything can happen in this position. The queens are being exchanged. But what's the point right now? Rook to f1, bishop c3, g3. Is Grigory Oparin about to win his game? Because the g-pawn does seem a very, very dangerous, not piece, but a very dangerous pawn, at least. So I would say it's very tough for white to deal with all those threats. Check king f8, check. Getting if white could get a draw, I guess he would be very, very happy with it, and that's something that is happening right now. Yeah, it's gonna be a draw. Look at this. The king couldn't have come to e8 because we take the rook. We take the rook back, and then we take on e2, attacking the king, attacking the pawn. And if king comes out of the way of the rook, then we take another pawn. So black was forced to make this draw. So that's a draw for the match. University of Missouri 1.5 points against half for Armenian Institute of Physical Culture and Sport. So only a draw is separating the University of Missouri from clinching their final spot. Let's take a look at Mikhail Antipov versus Anna Sarksyan. What do we have here? The material count is balanced, but the queen on b7 is some sort of disturbing. It does threaten to take the pawn on a6 and creates a lot of miscoordination. For the black side, it's not that easy to defend against all those threats, because if we go rook to a8, protecting the pawn, then we drop the exchange. Takes, and black would be exchanged down, so that's not something that would happen. Bishop d5 is being played instead. So if we take on d5, which is happening, what is the follow-up? I guess maybe knight takes, attacking the bishop and at the same time opening the g7 bishop up. I guess that would be the call for Anna. Though maybe it's not that simple. Maybe something tactical is what I miss. But okay, queen d5. Maybe it was only the decision, just a matter of choice. Maybe that's all this was all about. Now, if queen takes a6, then maybe black can start pushing on the king side, like h5. No, the queens have been exchanged, so we cannot see any sort of crazy attack, and we will witness just a quiet positional and strategical battle, mainly on the queen side. If knight comes to c5, then it bothers the a6 pawn quite a lot. And let me make a move just to show you some variation. Attacking the pawn on a5 and preparing some sort of knight d6. Maybe not this color. Let's take a yellow one, just to attack all those 3 pieces. But something different has been played. Rook to c7, just protecting from the threat, attacking the knight. And Anna Sarksyan does prepare some sort of queenside expand Maybe something connected with b4, just to undermine the d4 pawn. Maybe this will happen. The time does not favor her at all. 1 minute down, and position is quite complex. It's not easy to figure out who's better and if anyone is, of course. Bishop f8, and now attacking the bishop on c5, the knight on c5, of course. Bishop g5, attacking the rook. The rook does have to move away, and let's take a look if any other results are on. I don't see any, so so the match is still on. Bishop g5. Now the rook has to move somewhere. Not easy to point out where. Rook to a8 would be also my call, and now preparing something like b4, trying to break through on the king side, getting some counterplay, but just 14 seconds for Anna Sarksyan. That might be a really tough decision for her in the tough position. Alright, a lot of fast action. Let's break down this slowly. Knight d4, b4 takes, knight f6, trade, and bishop g7, g5, h6, trying to undermine this pawn. If I guess h4 is the move for white. I just lost my track. Rook to e3. Okay, maybe white can get some pressure on the c4 pawn, and that would definitely clinch a draw. Do we have the other result? Yes, we have. The woman grandmaster Tohirionova defeated Tigran Azaryan, so we have 2.5 to just a half point for University of Missouri. So we are definitely welcoming the University of Missouri as our finalists. We will just finish this game, since they won their third mini match against Armenian State of fitness, of physical culture and sport. Alright, this rook endgame, I guess, is going to end up in a draw, although I'm not entirely sure about it. Yeah, so we guess it's gonna be a draw, although both sides are still keeping the fight on. Although after h5, I guess it's just gonna be a draw, or maybe white does want more. Who knows? But it of course doesn't matter for the entire result of the match, since it's already over, as we have witnessed. So the final will be University of Missouri between St. Louis University. So I guess this match is going to be pretty tough for both sides, although I do think that University of Missouri have some sort of an advantage. Grigory Oparin has proven to be really strong today, but for the St. Louis University, for example, Benjamin Bach won quite a few important games, so I would, if I were to pick a winner, it would be probably the University of Missouri, although I expect a lot of fight, a lot of different ups and downs for both sides. But coming back to this game, white did take the pawn, but the pawn is being removed from c3, so it's just gonna be another day in the rook endgame office, which is going to be drawn, I guess. Unless something unless something really weird happens. More like king f6 is probably enough, or is it a draw? Or is it c2? If we take on e7 first, okay, it is not a draw. Or is it? Yeah, king d6 does make a draw. King d6, rook takes c2, and yeah, I was confused for a moment whether it is maybe winning, but right now, why do they keep playing this? I'm really confused. Yeah, it's gonna be a draw, but why do they keep playing it? I guess Anna Sarksyan is aware that the match is lost, or maybe she is not. Yeah, it's just a draw. All right, so we have our finalists, and let me make a short break, and we will be back in a few minutes. So stay tuned for the final action. Welcome back after the break. We welcome in our studio the FIDE president, Mr. Arkady Dvorkovich. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be with you today.
We will be witnessing the finals in 10 minutes, but first let's have a little talk about the event. Why the event was even organized, the online championship of the universities?
Well, first of all, I really believe in university sports in general. Besides having my education at Moscow State University and New Economic School in Moscow, I studied at Duke University, North Carolina, United States, and sports at US universities is a big thing. And of course, Duke basketball was the greatest thing to watch. Other sports as well, and I think chess can also play a role at the universities generally, globally. In the United States, firsthand, Russia, India, China, other countries as well, and I think that can create a real basis for the development of chess around the world. So that's why we started thinking about having the World University Championship already a couple of years ago. But of course, the pandemic changed a lot. So instead of having it over the board, we decided that we should move forward with online one. And thanks to our partners, Rio Grande and many chess friends around, we were able to do that. So I'm happy that it attracted interest from many universities around the world. But now we see the finals. So hopefully we will follow up with the over-the-board championship. If not this year, the next year we will monitor the situation and we'll do our best to continue universities chess in the nearest future.
Is it possible that FIDE in the future organizes the hybrid competition for the universities, like online qualifiers?
I think that would be the best format we can have for the qualifier stage. Having hundreds of universities competing in the hybrid form, sitting in public spaces at university campuses, students can actually play with visibility sufficient to attract spectators, graduates mostly from those universities, and then having finals over the board would be a nice thing as well.
How do you evaluate the event so far? What can you say about it?
I followed some of the games. I believe it's interesting. Of course, we have some teams really competitive, and it's hard to challenge those. So we have basically in the semifinals, both in the Blitz and Rapid, we have more or less the same teams from the United States, but based on students from Russia as well who came to the United States to study, like Oparin and Antipov playing for Missouri. They studied before in our Moscow Chess Club, named after my father, Vladimir Dvorkovich. We have St. Louis, of course, Rio Grande, Chinese team, Armenian team, so some big names. And it was quite interesting, but I really hope that we will have more teams competing for the highest possible places in the nearest future. So to do that, we have to make more publicity about the upcoming events, and we have to talk to universities, presidents, management, to establish kind of knowledge within the university communities that is important to improve the level of teams. And I think the most important thing is to let alumni know about those competitions, since alumni will certainly follow that if they would if they would know about university championships.
One last question about this event. Who do you think will win the finals, or do you have somebody to root for?
Well, in sports, the whole thing is competition, surprises. So no predictions whatsoever. Of course, I know Oparin and Antipov very well. They are very good players. They improved to the level of the national team, basically, and they're candidates to the national team of Russia. But we will see. We will see. It doesn't mean that in a particular match they will necessarily win. If you go all the way to the finals, you can win and lose on both sides. So let's watch the games.
And I have one last question, not concerning this event, but concerning the other event, which is planned in the next month. This is the candidates tournament. Right. Are there any issues with it, and how possible it is to carry it out at the planned time?
Well, we do not have any particular issues. We are working on the medical protocol, of course, with the local authorities, and it's very constructive and very friendly to players. We are resolving the last stage logistical issues, since players and their teams have to come safely to Ekaterinburg, but I do not see any big issues with that. On the side of the players, it is also very friendly and constructive. So I'm sure we can work out all the details and proceed with the competition smoothly to identify the challenger for Magnus to have the match later on in Dubai, starting 23rd of November.
The entire chess community hopefully roots that the event is going to happen and there will be no issues. So thank you very much for coming to the studio, for taking your time. It was a great pleasure to have a talk with you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Good luck with the finals. Thank you.
So thank you. And we will be back after a short break. In 2 minutes we start the finals. All right, so we are back after the short break. We hopefully will start the final games in 1 minute. The favorites are, I guess, there are none favorites for the win, since both teams have proven to be really strong and get their match victories quite convincingly. Although the St. Louis University had definitely some trouble and against University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. This match was really close, but on the other hand, the University of Missouri won their match in the 3-1 fashion. So we do expect a great fight, and obviously the system for the finals is the same. We've got 4 mini matches consisting of 4 games 3 males, 1 female. The rate of play is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds per move. And in case of a tie, we would have another match being played. And in case of another tie, we will witness the Armageddon game. The games have not started yet, as far as I can see, so we will wait a little bit more to have them on. Hopefully everything will be fine and there will be no technical issues, as we had at the semifinals, so the games weren't synchronized. But I see some games are being started, so maybe let's take a look at the game between Ali Marandi and Badelka. Let me just bring it on the board and bring it on the screen. And here we have it. So let's take a look at it from the very beginning. We've got a Slav defense, d4, d5, c4, c6. And the line, so-called the exchange variation, c takes d5, c takes d5, bishop to f4, knight c6, knight to c3, and the move e5. I haven't seen it to be fair, but I assume that since Ali Marandi played it really fast, that's his preparation. He sacrifices the pawn, but after d takes e5, he goes d4. He disturbs the knight from the square on c3, knight e4, queen a5. Hitting the king, hitting the pawn, knight retreated to d2, and now what happened? Knight to e7. He could have taken the pawn back and be in an equal material situation, but he went for initiative. For the initiative, knight to e7, knight f3, knight d5, bishop g3, knight e3. What a move! What a stunning idea! He just hangs the knight to the pawn, but if we take it, then he took it back with the pawn, and we've got a nasty pin along the e1 a5 diagonal, and the pawn is attacking the knight, so the knight cannot be saved. a3 is a move that does create a threat of bringing the pawn to b4. That's why I guess e takes d2 has to be played. And I've got an interesting idea. If we take, and if we fall for the trick, take with the queen, then a nasty move bishop b4 is incoming. Pinning the queen with the king, and if we take, we lose the rook on a1, which has been unprotected. So that might be the idea, but Ali Marandi is taking his time. He's not committing to the decision yet, so we will see what his choice is going to be. Definitely this game is spicy. He went for the move bishop g4. Let us just check the idea. b4, now e takes d2. Oh, queen takes d2 is a bad move, as I mentioned earlier. Knight takes d2 had to be played, and black would be more than fine, since of all the initiative and all the weaknesses on especially the pawn's undeveloped king side, but queen takes d2 is just a blunder. After bishop takes b4, that's the motive we had earlier. The pin along the a file, pin along the diagonal. The game is soon to be done, I suppose. So the exchange up for Turkish Grandmaster playing with the black pieces, and I think his position is also pretty much dominant. He attacks another pawn. He might as well bring the knight all over from b4 to, I guess, d5, and then move on and get something done. And position of Olga Badelka is really tough. King is very exposed. Rook has not come to the play yet. The doubled pawns on the e-file are also quite weak. So I assume the game is gonna be over, and the position is completely winning for Ali Marandi. So a very nice piece of preparation by Ali Marandi. Now b5, queen c5 could be played. Just let me show the motive. Queen c5, attacking the b5 pawn, attacking the queen, the king, but he chose to take the pawn on e5, and after bishop to g3, the position is still winning. He might go for something like queen to c5 right now, and after, or maybe the move like queen. No, queen to d4 is not the move, since the queen is pinned with the king and with the king. So knight takes g4 is possible. You cannot move your queen, since you would drop the king. And queen c5 has been played, and not queen d4, but king to f1 by white. Right now there are many possibilities to get the job done, get the winning position, get the conversion of the advantage. Rook to d8 is probably one of them. If we take on e5, then we go rook to d1, bishop comes back to e1, and we take back the knight, since the king is trapped on f1. And knight to e5 was played, rook to d1, and the game is going to end up in a way that we have expected. Rook takes e5, bishop takes b7, snatching one of the pawns away, but it cannot be enough to be fair. So we assume it's gonna be over pretty soon. Although let's not count the white player out of the equation. A lot of weird things can happen, especially in the blitz game. Queen takes b5 was a topical move, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn on e2. Bishop to f3 was forced, obviously. So right now, what are the options to convert the advantage? I guess you could push the pawn to h5, but rook to e8 was played, ensuring you're not getting checkmated on the 8th rank. King g2, bishop to e4. Now the bishop is forked, not forked but pinned with the king, and the move queen to e2 is a threat, since bishop does not protect the pawn, and that's what happened in the game. Although, hang on a second, takes. Why did he drop the bishop? Okay, it might not be over. It's still quite difficult for the white side, but she won a piece back. So definitely some more chances, but. Black has 2 pawns in return, and also the dominant position of his pieces, queen to d5, but it does drop the pawn on g4, right? But the time is the most important issue. Oh, it does drop the bishop as well to the double attack. Yeah. So it's gonna be over, and indeed it is. Okay, let's take a look at the game on the first board between Nicolas Feodor and Grigory Oparin. And we can see that on the board black is for the time being a pawn up, that's this pawn, but white got some nasty little pin along the 8th rank. What happened? Bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, rook to e6, creating some pressure on the 6th rank, trying to maybe take the h6 pawn away. Rook went back to f6, rook have been exchanged, and I guess the game is probably going to be drawn, or is it? Rook takes b5 is the most important move. Rook to d6, king f2, d3, and the pawn can be stopped by a king, but the rook gets some sort of activity. It does create a threat of taking the g3 pawn away. Rook to b6 is a very good counter play. King g7, rook b7 check, and I think it might be a draw, although maybe it isn't. Rook to b6, king to f5, no, that move g4, probably a more accurate way to hold the position, because if we go rook d4, then rook b6, and the king cannot come to f5, it has to come to e5, and then rook takes h6 probably secures the draw. But rook d6 was played, and rook to b5, so there's probably not much black can do, nor do white, so it's probably going to be drawn pretty soon. All right, King G7, yeah, and they are repeating the position. So it's going to be a draw, or is it? Before by Feodor, trying to get the pawn as far as possible. All right, that's a really interesting thing. He voluntarily gives the G4 pawn up, but in return he gets his king out, and the B pawn may be some sort of an issue. Let's take a look at the match situation. It's tight. It's not tight up, but we can see on the second board Mikhail Antipov is probably having a winning position versus Benjamin Bach. So, and yeah, indeed he did win his game. So that explains the fight between Feodor and Oparin. B6 G4. There are still many tricks to be watched out for, but right now we can see that it's going to be probably drawn as well. Yeah, they are repeating their moves, and there's not much anyone can do, so that's a draw. Let's jump to the last game, and we've got a game between Tsolakidu and Raya Harshit, but the game has just concluded. White won, so first mini-match victory for the St. Louis University. Mainly because of that great piece of preparation by Grandmaster Ali Marandi on the fourth board, since he just destroyed his opponent with the black pieces, and that was really important for the entire match situation. All right, so 1-0 for the University of for the St. Louis University. It's not the online, it's not the over the board event. It's an online event played on Chess24. Unfortunately, nowadays we can't have international over the board events, but we can have international online events. So it does it does make up a little bit for it. Let me take a 15 seconds break, and I'm back at the moment. Alright, I hope you didn't leave the broadcast, since the break was really short. Alright, we wait for the second round of play. The breaks are gonna be probably a little bit longer than previously, since we've got only one match being played, not two like in the semifinals. But in the first match, the St. Louis have maybe not struck, maybe not shocked, but they definitely proved they are capable of winning the entire event, and they took the lead. So they are now definitely the favorites for the rest of the match, but I'm wondering how it's going to be if we switch colors, because in the next match the colors are being switched on each board. So I would love to see Grigory Oparin showing some great chess to us. So definitely we can expect a lot more fight, because now University of Missouri have to catch up in the match. It's not the most comfortable situation for them, but it's not the situation where they are from which they cannot come back from. That's obviously not what I'm going to input. But okay, let me check. When do we? Probably in 5 minutes we are gonna be witnessing the other game. So let us do a little bit of post analysis of the game between Antipov and Bach, because we can afford to. We have a little bit more time. Okay, so it was some Sicilian defense, some modern line. Knight c6, queen e3. The move queen d2 has been popularized by Magnus Carlsen, followed up by b3, bishop b2 and long castle. But queen e3 played by Antipov, g6, bishop d2, and still long castle. So some new plan. Knight f6, f4. Okay, some standard Sicilian position. Queens have been exchanged. f5, e5. Okay, that's interesting. Taking some advantage of the pin. The pawn cannot be taken because g5 deflecting the knight, and if knight gets removed, then we take on d7. So knight e8, f6, and take on d6. f5 takes, knight e5 takes, knight d5, rook d8, bishop g2, king g7. So the endgame with one pawn up for the white side has arisen. All right, bishop a7, bishop b6, and probably we some smooth conversion. Oh, that's a nasty blunder. Black should have gone g5, but f5 is a blunder because after bishop takes f5, you cannot really take on f5 since you would drop the rook on d8, and you can't take with the pawn since the pawn is pinned with the king. Bishop f5, and with the extra exchange, the position was definitely quite easy for a grandmaster like Antipov to win. So quite a nice victory for Antipov, because but it was not enough to get the match victory, or at least a match draw, since they lost 2.5 or 1.5. That was the only victory for the University of Missouri, and we can see some changes in the team of from Missouri. We've got Christopher Repka instead of Raya Harshit, and we've got women grandmaster Tohiryanova instead of Olga Badelka. So that's an interesting change. Let us see whether it will change the result of from the first match, first mini match, I would say. And the games will start, I guess, in a 2 minutes time. So still a little bit of waiting for us, but we can expect definitely maybe some change of pace, because if with fresh blood, as I would call it, for example, Grandmaster Repka strikes with the white pieces, then this would make a whole of a difference to the entire match score. Yeah, I assume that just 1 minute left for the games to begin, and maybe we will stick with the game of Christopher Repka against Stravula Tsolakidu, since we haven't covered it the games of those players from the very beginning to the very end. So I think we will stay with it to the end, but there is still some waiting time. I guess in about 30 seconds we will see the action, but still maybe something will happen in terms of technical issues, but we hope obviously not, since the tournament was going quite smoothly for the time being. So I don't expect any sort of breakdown from the connection side. Yeah, we've got 10 to 9 p.m. So the games should begin, and yes, we do have the games. So let's take a look at the game between Christopher Repka and Stravula Tsolakidu. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, and pawn to e3 short castle. That's a classical Rubinstein variation of the Nimzowitsch defense, and let's check what setup is going to be chosen by both sides. The standard line with knight f3 and short castle was Chris's choice, and Strabula chose the move bishop c3, b takes c3, claiming that that weakened pawn structure is more important, or at least as important as the loss of a bishop, and we've got some standard play for this line. The clinch of the pawns in the center, and maybe the pawn on c4 can be attacked pretty soon, although with the knight on e7 it's not that easy, because usually you would get your knight to a5, bishop to a6, and then take on c4. But for the time being it's not that easy, so I guess the other choice has to be made by black, a4 from the white side, trying to get some queenside expand, getting some space. Knight g6, rook e1, h6, h6 taking away the g5 square from the white's pieces. Maybe preparing some knight h7 and f5 even. a5 played, seizing more and more space on the queen side. Maybe the plan is to get white's rook to the b file and then pressure the pawn on b7. That would be some sort of interesting, and as well the move b6 is not encouraging at all, because after a takes b6 the rook would be pinned, but we've got something different. Knight to h5, trying to get the knight to f4, and the move knight to e5 getting the queen to attack the knight is not possible, because after knight takes e5, queen takes h5, you drop the piece on d3, so it's not possible. But knight bishop, so that's why bishop f1 was played, and knight to f4. So right now the move g3, kicking the knight away, is not something you would want, because of the move knight to h3. Giving the check and the knight is a little bit annoying usually there. It's not easy to kick him out of there, and it will disturb a lot. But I guess that's what happened in a game. G3, knight h3, or did it? Or I'm not entirely sure. No, it didn't. So that was that's Chris' turn to get something done. He takes his time. He got only 1 minute 20 seconds in comparison to 2 minutes 30 seconds for his opponent. So I guess a very comfortable position for black. And it's not... I'm not really sure what white really wants here. What is his plan? Since black has an obvious plan, a follow-up with f5. King h1 was played, maybe preparing that little move g3, just trying to escape from the check, since the king is not there on g1 to be attacked. And f5, the move I was mentioning, striking the center. Knight to d2, getting the knight to e4. The fight for the e4 square is now the most important thing in this position. The side who seizes control of it will get a little advantage. Although the black's position is also pretty comfortable. You can see the rook's pressure on the f file. That's why I would say the black's chances are maybe higher there. Although I guess the position is probably balanced, but I think the time issue will be a problem for Chris. He needs to find something pretty quickly. f3 is a good move, cementing this square on e4, trying to get the knight protected, and then the rook might take this knight if the exchange was about to happen. That's why now black has to find something, maybe not concrete, but some sort of a plan, how to proceed, how to find maybe some sort of a break, because f5 is a topical break that happened. But what is going to happen next, that's the matter of question. And we will surely witness it in a moment. Queen to d7, overprotecting the bishop, getting the queen to the same diagonal. Rook a2, a typical move, protecting the second rank with the rook. The rook is not really attacking anything on the a file, but it does take control over the a file and the second rank. g3, kicking the knight away. So what's the follow-up right now? Is it knight h3, or maybe first you need to take on e4? Because maybe even knight h5 is possible, but knight h3 was played, and the time advantage of the black side is slowly but surely decreasing, although it's still existing. That's why I would still say that black has a little bit of an advantage, especially in such a blitz game that the time has the most impact on. Bishop to d3. The threat was in fact to take on e4 and follow it up by getting the queen to the f file. That's why bishop to d3 was played and rook to f8. Now getting the bishop to the e4 square would be something that white would be happy with, since the bishop on e4 would protect everything on every single diagonal he takes. But rook to f1, maybe. I don't know what the plan is, but the thing I know is that the time on the white side is getting lower and lower, and it's not something he's comfortable with at all. Just 12 seconds on a clock in comparison to Tsolakidu's 40. So queen to b1, knight f5, bishop c1. The pawn on f3 was hanging, but it couldn't have been taken, since after rook to f3, I guess the move like knight to f6 would happen. So that's why we witnessed knight to f5 and bishop to c1. And maybe the rook will get to b2 and get some pressure on the b7 pawn. It's not easy to evaluate, but it certainly creates some problems for black. Now the knight cannot really go to e7 because it would block the rook. Queen to c2, h5, g5, h5. That's a bold attack from the black side. Maybe g4, maybe h4. A lot of difficult questions to come, especially in such little time that Christopher Repka has. G4, getting the light squared blown over, getting them opened. And now, after f4, I guess the move e4 would happen. Bishop to e4, that's why has been played. Rook to f7, and now f4. h4, striking on g3. Rook to e2, getting the rook along the e-file. So it's gonna be madness. 8 seconds versus 7. It's gonna be close. It's gonna come to the wire. Although I don't know who has higher chances. It's I guess 50-50 for both sides to win this game. King to g7, and what's the point? Rook to h1. Maybe rerouting the queen to the h file would be something to do. Rooks are being traded. Queen to e1, queen to h1 maybe in the future. Rook f8, takes on f5. Queen h7. Queen now creates a threat to come to h3. King to g1. That's the move to watch out for. King to g8. I don't know what this move really is, but it's a real madness. Queen e3, queen h3, rook h2, and the queen is trapped. Yeah, the queen is trapped. If we take on g3, then takes, and bishop g6, rook f1. That's what happened. The game is not over yet, but it's gonna to be pretty soon. King g3, and yeah, the pawn and the bishop and the extra pawn will make the difference. So Christopher Repka does win in this tense time trouble situation. We've got a victory for Benjamin Bach as well. Let's jump to the game between Grigory Oparin and Nicolas Feodor. But it's a piece up for Oparin playing with the white pieces. Although if we take the f3 pawn away, the position becomes a theoretical draw. It will be a rook and the bishop versus a rook, which is a known theoretical draw. But the king comes to e3 just to attack the rook on f4 and trying to deflect it. Rook to b4. As expected. Maybe now the rook shall come to b2 just to kick the king away. That would be certainly an idea. Bishop g6. Right now f4 can be played, but h3 has happened, and rook to b3. What is this? What is this? I don't really like it, because bishop takes f5, h2, and rook comes to a1, and it's probably just over. Rook goes away to h1 and then to h2. Yeah, so that will make it a draw, not a draw, but a win for for Grigory Oparin, and that's what we see. The last game has been drawn between Ali Marandi and Tohir Yonova, so a change in the lineup has proven to be a real game changer, because University of Missouri came back, and now the match is tied 1-1. So definitely we can expect more fight. I'm not sure if St. Louis University had some changes in the lineup. Let me just check it. Yeah, Robbie Kevlishvili was playing, but and Gabriela Antova, and we can see Akshat Chandra. So some changes in the lineup are maybe bound to happen. Maybe they are possible. So if fight fire with fire, as they call it. So if your opponent did change the lineup, let you do the same. Just get something a little bit different, since now the match, we would say, starts from the very beginning. We've got situation really tied up, 1-1, and the board points are not really relevant, but I would say it's tied up. It's 4-4, but it's not relevant. Only the match points are counting. Where can you see the bracket? I can link it in chat on Chess24. So let me just link it. There were 4 teams playing from the very beginning. We had the Armenian State Institute of Physical Culture and Sports, and the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley with us, but they got eliminated, and we are just down to the final 2 teams. So 2 more mini matches to come, and at least 2 more matches, because maybe we can witness some tie breaks. So let's take a look at the game between Bach and Antipov. It was pretty short. Just 21 moves. Did Black flag? Let me just check it. I guess it did happen that he just lost on time. But let's break it down from the very beginning. Knight to f3, knight to f6, c4, g6, g3. Benjamin Bach went for this setup in our first game of today between him and Kamil Dragon. b3, knight d4, d4, d5, bishop to b2. Yeah, it's pretty standard position for the g3 Greenfield. Black center is quite solid, so is white's, and we would just call those positions equal, and they have been studied for a while in a couple of last years. a3, knight d7, rook c1, rook d8. But somehow Benjamin got his position pretty much better, because he got the advantage of space, and after c5 he has now the possibility to break through by playing the move pawn to a4, and the other break in this position that could happen is the black's break, the move pawn to e5, but it's not possible, because the pawn does cover the square, the bishop and the knight, and for the black side there are only 2 pieces covering it, so he would need to bring at least one more piece to make this break happen. So queen b7, a4. Black is just slower in his play. a6, rook a1, rook a8, rook a3, h6, rook a1, and in this position I guess Black lost on time, but this position is not easy at all. Although it's not obviously lost, but it's just tough to play. White would open the A file up anytime he wishes, and then he would just maybe invade through the A file For example, he can prepare it like, let me just draw it like queen b1, queen a2, and then 3 pieces are attacking the rook if we remove the a pawns. If we remove those pawns right now, and then only 2 pieces are protecting it. So the opening of the a file would be better for black if we just put the queen on a2 instead of c2 as it is now. And there is no easy plan for black to be played, and that's why I think his position is more difficult, but it's not over yet. Of course, a lot of things could happen, but definitely it's not something to. It's not definitely the position you would resign in, but it's just it was just a time, I guess, that made the whole of a difference. Alright, so we've got 4 more minutes to get the games, the other games ongoing. So we've got probably some changes in the lineup as far as I can see. Yeah, we've got Akshat Chandra coming to the St. Louis University squad, and Robbie Kevlishvili as well. But the University of Missouri does stick with the lineup they defeated their opponent in the previous match. So if something does work in life, then why would you change it? And one game has started, I would say, but is it being played or just is it premature between Antipov and Bach? We've got d4 on the board, but I guess it's just a false start, as you would call it in other sports. So probably White started the game too early, since we've got still 2 minutes to go to get the round number 3 ongoing. All right. Let's maybe take a look at the last game from the previous match, since we can afford to. We have 2 more minutes between Ali Marandi and Tohir Yonova. We've got some Trompovsky opening. h4. h4 is a really interesting move in those type of structure, because if you take this bishop, White gets the h file opened for him, so he would be definitely happy with it. That's why you usually don't take this bishop. Queen b6, rook b1, protecting the pawn. Okay, we've got some standard setup. White voluntarily decided to double his pawns on the f file, but those pawns, those red ones, are really red ones. Yeah, those red ones are rather strength than a weakness, because they support the move knight to e5 in the future. All right, so we've got a thematic break of c5, and later on we have g4. That's an interesting attempt to get the attack going, and I think that Black should be in some sort of a danger, but she managed to find knight g5. What is this? That's a nasty little tactics. If you take queen e6, take on attack on the king, and attack on f5. So the piece has been recovered. Nice deflection of the rook, and we've got to the rook endgame with 2 pawns up for the white side, but he somehow failed to win it, since the king got active and the pawns have been exchanged. Yeah, that was probably a very difficult endgame to win, but definitely White was pressing the whole game, but he failed to win. Okay, so maybe let's stick with the game Antipov and Bach, and we've got the game live ongoing. So let's stick with it. So d4, d5 has been played, and just those 2 moves. So Antipov, I guess he's away from the keyboard, as you would call it in gaming. Maybe the game shall restart or something like this, since I don't see any other possibility. Or maybe c3. He lost like 30 seconds, but the game just continues. So that was his mistake. And we've got some London system, infamous or famous. Many people call it differently. h3, and black developed the bishop to the f5 square, where it is just more active than usually it stands on c8. So we've got, after h6, we would have just a symmetrical position for both sides along the 4.5 rank, as it would be just this line, yeah. Queen b6 and a4. Alright, so a5 would make the position completely symmetrical, but I'm not sure if that's a good way to proceed in this position, because after a5 you could consider maybe, I'm not sure, maybe taking on b6, and after knight takes, claiming that the knight is not placed that well. That's why in the game we witnessed bishop to e7, just preparing short castle. Nothing really strange, nothing really weird. So after bishop e7, a5 can be played, forcing the black queen to just I guess trade, because if you go to b8, then you drop the pawn on b7, so you have to trade on b3, and after knight takes b3, the position is just it's just probably balance is an endgame, but after a5, yeah, queen takes b3, knight takes b3, and short castle. And maybe the only tiny advantage that white has is preparing this a6 push, trying to somehow destabilize the structure of b7 and c6. So I guess that's probably the call I would make in the future. And the other advantage that white has is maybe that he's faster with the move c4, trying to get from, for example, the rook to c1, and then getting c4, and for example, rook to c4. So maybe that's the move to watch out for, but I'm not sure whether that's the thing. Bishop to e2, maybe black can go c5 on his own, and after, for example, d takes c5, knight takes c5, trade, he gets some opening of the position, but I'm not sure if that's beneficial for him, because white can get his knight to e5 and control all the board with this knight. That's a so-called octopus knight. So Benjamin Bach is taking his time. He's down just to 1 minute, so a pretty slow game from him. Antipov has over 2 minutes, so he didn't spend that much time. If we see it from the very beginning, he started the game with 2:30. So dropping just 20 seconds, and the moves that has been played are bishop to c2, knight to d2, b5, rook c1, bishop h7, and g4. Let's take a look at this. Does the move before concern white at all? Because if it does, then we can go b4 on our own and completely lock down the queen side, and then try to get something done on the king side. h4, g5, maybe rook to g1. So these are probably the moves, but I guess it's still up to Antipov, Antipov's decision how he will proceed later on. But now it's Benjamin Bach's decision, because he's dropped a lot of time. Let's see what he chose. Knight to e4, knight takes, bishop takes, rook to g1, a6, knight d2, bishop h7, bishop g3, c5, and bishop d1. Bishop d1 is a little bit confusing to me. Maybe he could have gone b4 just to make the c5 push impossible, but he decided that he doesn't. And after c5, bishop to d1, we don't really want to open the C file that soon, or maybe we do want. I'm pretty confused. The move played in the game was rook to c8, and after king to e2 we can consider taking on d4, since we have our rook on the c file, which is being protected by the other rook. So that's why I would say it's possible, but maybe there are some different choices possible, like getting the pawn to b4, maybe getting the pawn first to c4, then to b4. Definitely a lot of options for Benjamin Bach to be played, and I think that's his position is becoming more and more likely to maybe not win, but get some advantage. C takes e4, he takes d4, b4, c4, bishop to f6, bishop a4, attacking the knight. The only thing I'm worried about is that maybe in the future the time will make a lot of difference. Look at Black's time. He's just down to 6 seconds, and if we compare it to White's 1 minute 20, it's definitely not favorable for Black at all. And White can now take his time, take some decision to maybe slow things down, get some maneuvering play, or maybe even speed it up, just to get some tactical action. Maybe get the push of the f1, f4, f5. Maybe lock down the center with the move c5. There are definitely a lot of options available. And the move played in the game was c5. That allowed the move e5, but I guess Black did consider it. White did consider it. And after a couple moves, we end up in this position. Knight takes d4 is a very unpleasant move. It hits the rook, and if we can take the bishop, in fact, because if we take on c6, then we've got a move bishop e6. That's a skewer, attacking the king, attacking the rook. And that's what was played in the game. King e2 takes, king f8, f3, bishop comes back, and this endgame is favorable for White, because the bishop is pretty bad on g6, and the knight on c6 is doing a great job. It did attack the pawn, so it snapped it away. Rook b8, c6. That's a very good move. It's impossible to take the knight, because c7 and c8 will come. It's unstoppable. And we've got c6, king to e7 now. The knight can take the pawn on d5 with check. That's one important and one of the important details that that can matter the most. So can he take? He went c7, rook c8, king e3, but I'm not sure if he could take on, maybe on could have taken on d5. Maybe not. Maybe he couldn't. He decided to take on a6, and after f6, he's 2 pawns up, and he can roll the b pawn all the way down to b7, I would say. So, or maybe not really, because bishop can come to e8 and cover this. The action is speeding up a lot. So let's take a look how it went. f6, king d4, bishop e8. Now the arrows are just terrible. It got lagged. Bishop c6, b4, bishop b7, b5, g5, knight b4, rook takes, a6, bishop a8, king c5, even not taking the pawn on d4. Why is it like this? Not taking on d5, just preparing b6 and b7, winning the game. And we have a result. Mikhail Antipov defeated Benjamin Bach. What are the other results? There are no other results. Let's maybe jump to the game between Tokhirionova and Kevlishvili. We've got an endgame with 2 pawns up for the black player, and these are those 2 pawns. But the opposite colored bishops, one bishop is the dark squared one, and the other is light squared, make the position quite difficult to win, I would say, since the rook are being exchanged, and usually in those type of endgames, 1 pawn or even 2 pawn advantage is not enough to convert. But right now we can see Black's time run out, but obviously it didn't happen. He took the pawn and started rolling down his own pawns, and probably that's the best way to convert the advantage, or is it? Bishop c5, f3, king comes to... Yeah, it is. The move I was thinking about was bishop to d6, and after f3, king h1, king h3, then just take on g3 because of the stalemate, but it will not work at all. f3 just wins the game on the spot. So let's take a look how the game went. Bishop c5, yeah, f2, takes. One last trick, we can't promote to a queen because it's stalemate. But after king f3, the game is over. So Robbie Kevlishvili wins another game, and the match is tied up. We've got 2-2 with draws on the third and the third board, and wins on the second and the fourth. So we've got 1.5 to 1.5 in the match result. So it will come down to the last match coming in less than 10 minutes, and obviously in a moment we'll break down the other two games. Let me just check it. All right, so let's take a look at the game from the first board between Chandra and Oparin. Okay, so what was the opening? Opening was the classical Ruy Lopez, the most thematic opening of chess history, the most classical one. And we had the standard variation, but the bishop to b7 is not the most common move. The most common is probably bishop to e7 at this point. But this variation is also pretty interesting, getting the bishop out on c5 actively from the very beginning of the game. Knight c3, d6, a3, h6, bishop e3, castle takes, knight to d5, knight to d4, and after some exchanges we've got a pretty quiet position with not that much action ongoing, although white did get the move f4 and the rook to f5, so I like the position of Chandra a little bit more, but it's not that easy to convert. He tripled on the f file, but the pawn on f7 is strongly protected by a queen, by a rook, and by a king, of course. So Oparin decided to go c4 and get the play on the other side of the board, get a lot of the counterplay, and I guess. Oh, the pawn has been sacrificed. All right. Let me think a little bit about this. Rook to c7, queen d4, f6. Of course, there was a threat of a checkmate on g7, f6, queen d5 takes. But on the other hand, black had a lot of counterplay. Rook to c1, followed by rook to h1 was a big threat, and that's why Chandra decided to go queen d5. Making sure that he's not gonna fall for any sort of checkmate tricks. And after rook d6, a5, rook a6, a4, d4, and we've got the position a rook endgame with balance material. So yeah, it's gonna be we've got some exchanges. All right, so not that much of a tactical fight, but a lot of there were a couple moments where both players could go wrong, but as they are very strong players, and they didn't fall for any tricks, and they just finished the game peacefully in a draw. And let's take a look at the game between Solakidou and Repka. It was a Catalan opening, g3 against the Nimzo Indian, fianchettoing the bishop and getting it out on the long diagonal. The open variation with d takes c4, and the popular line with a6, castle, knight c6, e3, bishop d7. The other move here is rook to b8, which has been played recently quite often. Bishop d7, queen e2, and we've got a pretty much a standard position this type of an opening, but getting this e5 and knight to d8 seems quite passive, because the knight does not look great on d8. But the thing is, Black can break up in the center by the move like c6 or maybe even c5, as it happened in the game. b5, a3, knight b7. And the knight got his place pretty soon. The knight is quite well placed here because it protects the bishop, and also and it doesn't allow any sort of tactical tricks. Takes, knight f5. Yeah, if not for the knight on b7, the bishop on d6 would have been lost. That's why queen c7, queen f3 has been played, and bishop pair versus two knights, but the pawn on d5 is isolated, although it's a pass pawn, so it's not that easy to evaluate it. Get some more action. Rook c6, knight c4. All right, rook c8 takes, bishop c3, queen f5. So the pawn on e4 suddenly became a weakness, because it is attacked by a bishop, by a queen, and it's protected by a queen and a knight. So you have to watch out for the idea of, for example, bishop takes f6 and then followed by taking on e4. So we had rook to d8, rook d4, knight g4, counter-attacking on df2 square. Queen c2, knight f6, h3 takes. So a lot of exchanges being made, and we can see the game the game has concluded in a draw in a very peaceful fashion. So, all right. So that was the final game from the previous match, which we had to cover. And let us take a look at the pairings of the final matchup. The match number 8. We've got some changes in the lineup. We've got Benjamin Bach on the first board, Stravula Solakidon on the second, Robbie Kevlishvili on the third, and Ali Marandi on the fourth. And the University of Missouri does come back to their original lineup with Raya Harshit and Olga Badelka. So it's gonna be an interesting battle. Of course, that's a battle for the first place. So it cannot be. It has to be interesting, right? That's why it's very difficult to pick a side that can win easily, because the teams have played more or less in an equal strength. So I would expect, if I look at the pairings, I would expect maybe Missouri to win 2.5 to 1.5. Let's check if my prediction is gonna be right. But that's the thing I would predict for this match. And if we have a winner in our final matchup, then the winner will be the champion for the first FIDE Online Blitz Cup for universities. So that's why we have a lot of action ongoing, and just before we start, I will take a 30-second break, so just make sure to stay tuned and don't go away, since a lot of action is gonna come pretty soon. Alright, so I'm back, and let's take a look. Maybe we will start with the game between Oparin and Bach. Let's wait for the first moves on the board. And we've got d4 by Oparin. Benjamin played d5 against Antipov, but he failed to make any points. of this game. So let's see what his response is gonna be. Maybe he will change something up. He likes to play some sort of Nimzo Indian, some maybe Ragozin setups against knight to f3. So the move d5 or knight to f6 followed by e6 are definitely to be expected, and d5 indeed is on the board. So what does Oparin opt for? Does he go for standard c4? Okay, we've got a Slav defense. c4, c6, knight f6, knight f3, knight f6, and the move g3, which is not that much common, but it certainly is possible. And we've got some probably standard setup for this sort of a position. It also reminds of some Greenfield with the move g3, because the bishop has developed on g7, and the only difference is that the pawn was taken on c4. What happened there? a4, knight to e4, queen c2, knight d6. So black definitely wants to hold on to this pawn on c4, and after e4, white definitely goes for some e5, trying to distract this knight, and then most likely take the pawn on c4. Knight a6 was played, and knight a3, just trying to take that pawn with a knight, and not committing to any e5 moves. So the Oparin wants to stay flexible for the time being. No too early commitments for this game yet. That's a reasonable decision, but let's see how it pays off. Knight b4, attacking the queen. Queen has to move, and just to stay in contact with this pawn. Bishop to g4, trying to pin, and it indeed does the pin. So the move knight c4 has to be considered, but it wasn't that strong, because it would drop the pawn on d4, either this or different way, like bishop f3, knight c4, takes, queen takes d4. So the pawn sack was not in Grigor Oparin's taste. He didn't want to go for it, so we went for the protection, rook d1, short castle, and now I would say knight takes c4 is probably maybe not forced, but that's the most natural move that comes to my mind. Although h3 can be included, and that's the idea to be worried about. And white claims that he has a bishop pair. He will take the pawn on c4 pretty soon, and he will not be a pawn down, and he will get some special advantage. So he will be a little bit better, and taking into consideration the time situation, that he is almost 1 minute up, I would say that Grigory Oparin has definitely more chances to win the game, and it is a very important one, since if he does win, then he will most likely get the leadership for his team to the championship stage. Rook to d8, h5, h4, h4, h5. That's a very common maneuver. Maybe getting the king to g2, rook to h1, and opening the h file up. Maybe that's the point that Oparin is trying to make. Rook to d2 for the time being. First, if you want to attack, first you need to make sure that you don't drop anything, that you are fully protected. So that's why the moves rook to d8, rook to d1 were played. Bishop f6, h takes g6, and h takes g6 is of course the most logical. Bishop g2, and now if bishop comes to g5, then we go f4, and then we make sure that the bishops are not exchanged, since we've got a bishop pair, and usually we just to get the full potential of those two pieces, we want to keep them both. We don't want to trade them too early. Yeah, and the time advantage is still in favor of Oparin, and it's growing a little bit. Bishop to g5 was played. It's the most natural move that comes to my mind, and bishop can be exchanged. But although I don't like it, it may be possible. But f4 was played, bishop f6, bishop f2. So I would say that Black is still slightly worse, but it's not that easy to find a breakthrough in his position. He can just hold on to waiting with his bishop, as he does, just to save more and more time. But d5 comes on the board. Is it what it will result in? If we take on d5, we've got takes on d5, and most likely the knight will also take it back, since I don't see any other reasonable continuation. But maybe if we do trade everything up, then the queen does a very good role of attacking the queenside pawns on the queenside. And the queenside pawns on the black side, of course. That's what I meant. And the position is the trades have happened. The trades have happened, as we can already see. And queen to b4, protecting both pawns, and king g2, king g7. So the endgame is roughly equal, but maybe Grigori wants to get a little bit of some sort of pressing, just creating some small problems to his opponent, and making sure that he spends more and more time. But after bishop e3, queen e1 does attack the bishop, and it probably forces it to move away. Yeah, if we go like bishop f2, then we just have repeated the position. But the move queen to d2 happened on the board, and somehow it has to be taken, I guess, or maybe not. The move queen a1 is possible too, and if we take on a5, then we've got queen to b2. And the other move Benjamin chose was queen to b1, queen to d5, queen e1, bishop f2, and after queen b4 we would have a repetition. So it would be the second time the position arises on the board. So let's try to find out whether there is any sort of trick that White has to increase his chances to win this game. Queen to d3. What can be even played just to ensure you have some chances? I'm not sure. I can't spot any such idea. And the clock is supposed to have run down, but I'm sure it's just some lag. Yeah, queen e7, queen f3, queen b4, g4. Yeah, that's the move I would want to play. Just get maybe g5, distract the bishop from the diagonal. But b5 is a very good attempt to make a draw. Exchange all those queenside pawns where black was a little bit weaker, and then it will probably end in a draw. So a very tense endgame. F5 takes queen b4, bishop e3, king g8. Meanwhile, I can see that Mikhail Antipov defeated Stravula Sulakidou, but Ali Marandi has won his game against Olga Badelka. So we've got 1.5 to 1.5. So that's the last game of the match. And queens have been exchanged, so if we have a winner in this game, then the winner will be for the entire match, but for the entire tournament. But I guess the game is gonna be drawn, and we will gonna have the tie breaks, and the tie breaks is a single match on 4 boards, and in case of another tie, we would have one Armageddon game. So let's see if I'm right in my evaluation that it's gonna be drawn. Now you have to watch out not to play bishop c7, because that would allow unnecessary move bishop to e5, and you have to calculate the pawn endgame. But Oparin did manage to get his king to e5, so maybe some sort of pressure can be applied, but not really. Yeah. Benjamin Bach is just walking around with his bishop and making sure he doesn't lose, because that would lose them the tournament. So that's not the case. He does hold on strongly, because for the entire game he was a little bit worse but he made a strong statement and defended well. But let's see if he manages to do so to the very end of the game. And probably he does, but let's not count out the Grandmaster Oparin out of the equation, since he is capable of winning such an endgame. King b5, and now King b4 is such a big threat that it has to be defended with Bishop c3. So it's gonna be a draw, and it's gonna be 2-2 in this final mini match, and a tie in the entire match. So we're gonna witness the tie breaks. The first one of the first and the only ones of today. So let's just wait for this final game to finish, and then we will make a statement. Yeah, no progress being made by any of the players. The only thing that could bother Black is that he somehow allows the king to come maybe to d6, either to d6 or to f6, and then the pawn could be attacked. But this didn't happen at all. That's why I think it's gonna be drawn pretty soon. So no progress, and probably no victory for any of the players. So the longest game, I assume, for today, since it's taking over 10 minutes. But the players are playing so quickly that the board isn't updated up to date, but it does bring a couple moves at once, because look at Benjamin's clock. It's really toppled down to a seconds. Yeah, so okay, Grigori went for a crazy king rush, but it probably doesn't make anything at all. Although maybe it does. How about this pawn? Can it be taken? If yes, then it's like getting tricky, because the endgame may be lost, or I'm not, no, probably not, because the bishop, the point is that you have to cover the f6 square with the bishop. Or hang on a second. Can I go bishop b5 and go and push the pawn? And if I get my pawn to f7, then it's probably all over. Yeah. Wait a moment. Is it just over? Is it? I was talking about the draw for many minutes, but it's now getting down to the wire. Probably it's still a draw, although any mistake can happen to Benjamin easily, I would say. So let's see. Maybe it's winning. Maybe if we get the king to e8 and then cover, or no, I need my king on g8 or e8. I'm not entirely sure. This endgame is very difficult for both sides. So the thing is, you have to block the bishop's impact on the f8 square, because if you deflect the bishop from this diagonal, then you can get your pawn to f8 being promoted. And now what is going on? Bishop e7 will be met by bishop to g7 and king e6, king g6. So probably still a draw, but it's definitely not an easy one. Not the easiest day in the office for Benjamin Bach. Or is it? King e6, king g6, and then bishop to f6, and trying to get my king all around like this to e8. But probably he does hold on with his king to g7, and it still makes no difference. So probably it will be a draw, but it was not an easy one. A lot of different things could happen. I think the endgame. I saw the evaluation bar at some point that it was fully white, so it was completely winning for white. But we would have to break this down carefully. And right now, what is this? What is this position? Is it winning again? I'm just confused. It's so difficult. No, it's probably not. Okay, because if we get our bishop to b4 and our king to e6, then we cover the e7 square twice with the bishop and with the king. That's the thing to king with the king, of course here, right? So that would be the call, but 3 seconds for both players. So definitely any mistake is bound to be on the board. But king e6, yeah, that probably seals the draw, since I don't see a way to proceed. And bishop f8, yeah, and now bishop comes to the another diagonal, so it's gonna be drawn. But after a very very intense fight, still anything could happen. But did the game finish? That's the thing that's concerning me. No, it has not, but I guess it will shortly. Just to put it this way. I'm concerned whether we will start at 10 to in 4 minutes the last match, or we will wait for 10 minutes for the last players to finish their game, because they definitely need a rest. It's like a 17 minutes game. It's for the Blitz game with the rate of play of 3+2. It's very very much. And yeah, indeed we do have a draw. So we're gonna end in the tie breaks. So let's take a look at no pairings yet for the tie breaks, but the standings are there. Or no, they are not. It's not adjusted to the knockout system. I'm concerned at which point he was winning, because the evaluation bar got insanely wide. It surely has to be at some point where he was in the endgame with just a bishop and a pawn. But it was probably around here, maybe. I thought he can play that Oparin could play bishop here, maybe, and if bishop there, then f6, f7, and or maybe he needs to block his. Maybe it's still a draw. I don't know. Especially the games with such a short time control have to be brought down carefully, and without any sort of external support. It's quite difficult to tell where the mistake was made. So yeah, we'll head to the tie breaks, yeah, because there was one victory for St. Louis, one for Missouri, and two ties. And we will see whether this is our last matchup, or will we head to the Armageddon game, since both teams have proven that they are equally strong and they both deserve the title, but only one of them can do so. So let's see, because it's gonna be once again very close, down to the wire, but we have no pairings available yet, so I guess the games will start not that soon as we expect. So maybe we can just yeah, that's the only match being left, since it's the final match, and the only game of those of the last mini match, since we can see all other games have been finished, and we just wait for the tie breaks to begin. Let's just maybe check some other games of the mini match. Oh, we've got some cute little checkmate over there. So let's take a look at this game, since it might be might have been quite interesting. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna watch out for the pairings to appear. Okay, so we've got some Marocci again. It has been played. It has already been played. And the line with early knight x d4. The usual move is bishop d7, but the players also go knight x d4, with the point being they force the queen to take, and then they run down with the a pawn as soon as possible. Yeah, bishop e6, bishop e3, knight d7, a very typical position for Marocci. King to f1, that's a weird move. I don't understand it that much. Maybe it was a preparation for the endgame, and indeed it was, because we had queens being exchanged pretty quickly. So we've got the king to f8 before rook a2, but somehow the position of black is really strong. Look at the rook on the second rack, just controlling the entire white's camp. And if bishop e3, h5, h4, bishop e5, f4, bishop f6, provoking another weaknesses in white's camp. G3, rook a8. Okay, just bringing another rook to the action. King to e1, rook to a3, bishop f2, takes. Hang on, bishop c3, yeah. And now the knight comes to the action. Jumps to e4, maybe we'll jump to g4. And oh, that's an interesting exchange sack. Bishop c4, rook takes f2. So white didn't want to protect the e4 pawn. Maybe it wasn't possible at all, because if we go something like bishop to d3, then we got bishop d2, attacking the rook, attacking the bishop, but rook c8 still is possible. And after king comes to g7, then we can hide our bishop on c2. So maybe that was possible as well, although then the knight can jump to g4, or maybe it can jump to g4 immediately after bishop d3 and g4, attacking the f2 bishop. Yeah, so that wasn't easy at all. Rook takes f2, rook, king takes f2, knight e4 check, king g2, exchange sack, but white's position is becoming more and more dangerous. Knight d2, okay, first of all, he can take back the exchange. Look at the rook. She is not coming out at all, since all the squares are being covered by black's pieces. But Mikhail Antipov didn't want to take that exchange. He just went for some king run, knight e4, and for the king hunt was more important. And he found a really beautiful checkmate net with only 3 pieces, but all of them participating in the action. Okay, we've got the games, or I guess 2 games. Yeah, the pairings have appeared, but just only the 2 of them, not all of them. We've got once again Feodor against Oparin and Antipov versus Bach. So. Let's take a look and wait for the games to begin. So according, as far as I know, it will be the 1-3 +2 mini match, a rematch again, as a tiebreak. Let me look at this. Yeah, then a Blitz playoff matches. That's the thing. Okay, so if this is tied up again, then we head up to the Armageddon game. But if not, then we have a winner. So the tournament will surely finish. So let's just wait for the action to begin. I'm not entirely sure when it will start. So let me just wait for it with all of you. Since it has been a long evening, a long day in the office for the players, especially the finalists who have played a lot of games, and still more intense action to come. still more stress on them, so they are under a lot of pressure since the World Championship title is on the cards. Definitely, everybody wants to win it, but only one team will be victorious at the very end. So that's the thing to watch out for. All right, let me just. Okay, the other two games have appeared as well, so the pairings are Feodor Oparin, Antipov Bach, Solaki Repka, and Tohirionova Marandi. We witnessed this matchup at the it was the second match for second mini match of the clash between those two teams, and the University of Missouri won that duel. So let's find out how it will end with reversed colors, because back then Oparin was playing white, right now he's playing black, and the same story happens for all the other players. All right, so yeah, the mate was quite pretty. By Antipov, that one over there. I agree with it. Definitely one of the most beautiful finishes of this finals. But maybe I haven't seen all of the games that were really interesting and having some big action. All right, I'm not sure if we start at in 3 minutes. I guess that's the most likely outcome. So let's maybe just take a look at the other game that was decisive between Marandi and Badelka. Just take a brief look at it. What was played? It was the Trompovsky, again the opening choice by Marandi. And some standard setup being chosen by black and by white as well. I will of course check briefly whether the games will start, so that we don't miss any action. Okay, takes e4, rook d1, knight f6. Position is somehow a little bit more favorable for white, since the bishop on b7 is quite stuck. This pawn mass does take some space, but it's not that impactful and can be harassed pretty soon. Okay, he exchanged the bishops and targeted the d5 pawn, right? By preparing the break c4. Okay, takes, queen a2, and he got his two pawns being passed and getting them rolling. All right, and okay, what is this? Knight d5. The idea of knight f7 is pretty disturbing. So that's why she had to sacrifice an exchange, and after rook f2, queen d5, knight c7. A nice little touch of rook b1. Knight takes d5 is not possible due to rook b8 and the back rank checkmate. Only the mate can be it cannot be stopped, but it can be prolonged. Alright, so that was the game, and I think we're gonna stick with the game of between Feodor and Oparin, and I'm sure it will start in a moment. So let's stay on this board so that we don't miss any action. And previously my prediction was that Missouri wins 2.5, 1.5, and as I see the pairings, I think St. Louis is gonna take 2.5 this time. That's my prediction. Because I've seen that Marandi is very strong, dropping just half a point, winning all other games. So I think he, even with the black pieces, he can strike. He is capable of it. All right, the games are about to get started right now. So let's wait for them to to come, and we will focus on the first board between Feodor and Oparin, as I mentioned earlier. So just one 3+2 rematch, and then depending on the result, we will have another tiebreak, or just we will get the tournament finished. All right, so the games are not starting. That's just a little bit confusing to me. Whether since I expected them to start just about right now at 10 p.m. Or 8 p.m. UTC, and still no action on none of the boards. So I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe some sort of technical issues, or we do wait for something more to come. Maybe Oparin and Bach wanted to take some more rest, because they deserved it. Like almost a 20-minute game. Okay, I can see that Antipov and Feodor, Antipov and Bach is being started, and so do other games. So let's check it out. Knight f3, knight f6, g3, d5, bishop g2, c6, castles, bishop g4, d3. So-called King's Indian attack by Feodor. E takes f3. Oh, that's interesting. The usual stuff here is bishop takes f3, but e takes f3. That's an interesting attempt, just to providing that semi-open e-file for white and getting some control over the central squares. And that's why he wants to put his knight on e5, but now he goes for h4, trying to go h5 and maybe h6. That's why after Grigory goes for h5, and after knight g5, knight to d6. Knight has its own space on f5, and I'm not totally sure what's the follow-up for the white side. Maybe c3, d4, or maybe some. First of all, he needs to get rid of this pressure on this pawn. Bishop h3, rook e8. I guess he wanted to get some sort of action, some sort of sacrifice maybe on the e6 square. Rook to e8. c3, knight f6, queen to f3. All right. And knight f5, and if we take, then the structure gets pretty much balanced, but we don't want to really take too soon, so that's why rook e2 is played, preparing some bishop d2, maybe rook to e8, trying to seize control over the e-file, and then preparing that take on that exchange on f5. So now time for Oparin to really think of a follow-up. Since the structure is quite solid, the position is as well, and it's not easy to find any pawn breaks, pawn actions, or pawn levers, as they call it. But a5, all right. This move does snatch some queenside space. That's why it's. Maybe indicates that that black goes for some pawn play on the queen side, just trying to get some weaknesses. But although I don't see it working that soon, but now after we make a contact on a4 b5, it does get speed up, because if we take on b5, then c takes b5 followed by b4 can happen. And a lot of difficult decisions for both sides would appear, but king g2 played by Feodor, and b takes a4. Black just takes the pawn and claims that he's pawn up, and despite this pawn being doubled, he likes his position. That's a reasonable choice. Now let's take a look whether c5 is possible. It has been played, so it can be possible. Rook to d2. I don't like this move at all. I feel like Oparin is taking the initiative over the knight can swindle around from d6 to c4 and try to attack all the pieces. On the queen side, rook c8, rook d3, overprotecting the c3 pawn. But I feel it's getting a little bit out of control for the white side. The rooks are pressuring the white's position, and it's certainly not easy to find a good counter. Maybe he doesn't want to go knight d6 because then it will be met by some sort of bishop e3, bishop d4, activating that bishop. So I guess that's the choice in case of knight d6. Queen c6, king to g1, and if knight goes to d6 to e4, maybe right now it's possible as long as the bishop is not attacking the queen. But king g1, queen c4, hitting the rook is on the board, and now maybe knight can come to e4 just to create some more open files and open diagonals. But bishop f1, queen b3, queen to f3. I guess a3 is something that Oparin would dream of, just to get more pressure on this pawn, attacking its protector, attacking its defender. That's why I like his position more. He is a pawn up, and but now white goes for a repetition of moves. I'm not entirely sure that... oh, knight g4, knight g4, let's forget about it, about the repetition. Knight to g4, attacking f2, forcing some serious action, serious issues for the white side, and now a3. The c3 pawn can be taken, and so it does. So what is the move for Feodor right now? Takes. I don't see him getting out alive of this position at all. So I would say that Oparin is about to take this game away, and a very crucial victory with the black pieces, since usually it's at the high level the advantage of white pieces, of having the white pieces, is more important than in the lower levels of chess play, but he, with the black pieces, does take the initiative over, has the pawn up, has an attack, and I believe he is gonna win. And if he wins, then it would open the path to victory for the University of Missouri. So things get spicy, things get interesting, and as I can see on the evaluation bars on the other games, I guess I was wrong in my prediction, and the games are becoming in favor of Missouri, especially the games with the black pieces. And let's take a look how Feodor is going to respond. I'm not entirely sure how he wants to play. Queen e1, knight takes f2. Oh, that's a very massive tactics. If knight takes on f2, queen to g3 check, then snapping away all of the kingside pawns. King goes to the corner, queen takes. White just cannot survive this. I don't see him coming out as alive. The rook can also be deployed to the attack through the square on b1, but queen to f3 was played, king to h2, and now is the move knight g3 possible? I guess it is, but is it good? And that's the other side of the story, and I'm not entirely sure how to evaluate that, but he definitely can take the pawn on h4. This way or that way, he will have like 4 pawns for the piece, and a huge and massive attack on the opponent's king. And now Oparin takes his time. He wants to make sure that he wins the game and not falls for any sort of trap, any sort of trick. Knight to g3 played. Rook c2 protecting the bishop, and maybe sooner or later the rook will come along the c-file somewhere to create I don't know, maybe a threat. maybe something like this will will appear on the board. Rook to c2. How to proceed? Maybe rook b1 is a call, or rook to b3, or maybe rerouting the knight somewhere. Since knight g3 is not the move I like that much, but maybe it's fine. And Christopher Repka won his game against Stravula Sorakidu, so University of Missouri do take the match lead, but in this position somehow I feel White can survive. Maybe he can just I'm not even sure what to do, but I guess there is some sort of survival or savior. He went queen g2. That's the move I was about to mention. Queen to b3, knight h3, king g7, knight g5. And let's take a look at the other games. Ali Marandi defeated Tohirionova, so we've got a match tied down, but Antipov is supposedly winning, but we will come back to it later. Knight takes e6. What is this? What's the call? Where is it just going to end in a draw? Is it madness? King g7, queen takes g6, king f8, queen takes g6. The mate, no, queen g5 is played. All right, checkmate threat. Bishop to g1 check, throwing the bishop away. Queen f3. What is this? That's pure madness. Okay, now the pieces are being exchanged, so I guess it's gonna be, or maybe it is gonna be a draw after rook takes c1, queen e3. Attacking the king, attacking the rook. Let's take a look at this. Check, check, check. And after queen d8, it's gonna be probably a draw. Yes, and it indeed is. So let's, after some other moves, let's jump straight to the game of Mikhail Antipov. But he defeats Benjamin Bach, and the final results are in University of Missouri after a tiebreak defeat St. Louis University 2.5 to 1.5 and become the champions of the first World University Online Blitz Cup. So big congratulations to the team. They have proven to be the strongest one, and they were the slight favorites of the finals. So a lot of action ongoing, but we finally do have a winner. In case you have some last questions, feel free to ask. If not, we will finish the broadcast. Tomorrow the action starts pretty early. Tomorrow we have the Rapid Cup, also played on Chess24. And the first match starts at 5 AM UTC. It's between American between Shanghai University and I'm not sure yet. I will just check it briefly. Who are the finalists? So we will have a University of Missouri facing of University of Shanghai, and the second semifinal is St. Louis University versus University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. So more action to come. Tomorrow we have a rate of play 10 minutes plus 5 seconds, but it will be covered though. Covered tomorrow. All right. Thank you for watching the broadcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you soon tomorrow. There will be more action to come. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you tomorrow.